Welcome back to another episode here on the Hart Hustle Podcast with our next guest. That's actually, when I spoke to him, I was very in awe of just some of the things he shared with me. One of the things was that he was 20, he was homeless, he was a young father, but made a promise that it ends with him, not with his daughter. Jose, do you remember that day?
Oh
That
man,
com-
I remember clear as day.
yeah, man. Take us back there, man. When you think about who you are today and who you were at that moment, what is
Mhm.
that one word that you can just kind of put all that in? Like, and I give you an example, right? People always ask me about my life and my life experiences. How do I feel? My word was grateful. I feel like without the things that I've encountered in my life, I'm not sitting across from you here, Jose. What is that one word, if you can wrap that up in just one word?
It's a word I use often, and that's hope. Esperanza. The fact that it's just being able to dream and dream big. And while I'm grateful for everything and everything that I've had in life and all the experiences and opportunities I've had, I'm also grateful for the difficulties I've had in life. But what's always kept me moving forward is hope, the hope of a brighter day. And I think it's
Yeah.
hope. Like Casa Norte and the work that I do, we talk about hope all the time. And I always say that hope is a verb. It's a verb. It's something we put into action.
Tell us the organization. You just mentioned it. What are you doing at the organization nowadays? What some of the programs look like? Services. What does that look like for you guys?
Yeah, so La Casa Norte, it's an organization in Chicago that serves youth and families experiencing homelessness. We serve over 20,000 people across the city of Chicago with programs like, we operate three shelters, one on the south side of Chicago, two on the north side of Chicago, all serving youth 18 to 24. One of them is a pregnant and parenting program. We also do transitional housing, supportive housing. We in our main building of our main building at our main hub, we have a food pantry that we operate with a partner called Nourishing Hope, and we have a health clinic that's operated by an organization here in Chicago called Howard Brown. And then, as needs arise, we're always looking and collaborating with other nonprofits and organizations to make sure that the communities that we serve are being served properly.
You've been in nonprofit your whole life. Like, where does that all come from?
Yeah, I mean, I've worked in nonprofit pretty much my entire life. I've always worked with nonprofits, but I've worked. I did some time in this in government. I worked for the city of Chicago as a deputy commissioner of public health. It's a period of time when I was the chief marketing officer in the governor's office for the state of Illinois. I did a very short corporate stint, but the majority of the work that I've done has been in the nonprofit sector, and it's always everything I've done has always been done with the intention of making an impact to community. And all that's really driven by my personal life and my personal
Yeah.
story and how I grew up.
I was gonna ask. We all do the work because there's a why behind it. You were actually fortunate to even receive some of the resources, which is why you have this deep just passion for what it is that you do. What was the life looking like for you, Jose, before you're sitting at the table doing what you're doing today? I mean, phenomenal, right? But there's always a story usually behind every
Mhm.
successful person. Your success, what does that story look like?
Yeah, I look at my story. My story really starts predates all of me, and it really starts with my mom. And my mom making a decision that she was going to come to the U.S. to create a better life for the children that she already have. At that time, she already had eight children. She brought five of them with her, and she was really looking at to create a better life for herself and the children that she had. She gets to the U.S., leaves an office job in Mexico, was doing okay, but not great. But, she left there and comes here and finds out that the U.S. wasn't everything she expected it to be, that it wasn't going to be as easy as she thought it was going to be. Facing discrimination, issues with immigration became difficult for her. And all the work that she could really find was factory work. And she had never worked in a factory in her life, but that's what she started doing when she came to the U.S. And for most of my life, that's what she did. About a few months after she gets here, she meets my father. They get together. He's from a pueblo in Mexico, a small little town in Guanajuato, Mexico. Very different people. They don't have any. The only thing they have in common is me. Uh, so I joke that I was a love child of the '70s. They got together. They made me. They weren't together, but they were. But my father was very involved with me and my mom at an early age. And then at that time there started being some immigration crackdowns in the U.S. My dad ended up getting deported. He's gone for a while, and that leaves my mom with not only the children that she already had, but me as well now, and she has to figure out how to fend for herself. My mom worked two jobs most of her life. She went from one shift to the next shift, always factory work, always working very hard, but always had a hard time making ends meet. And so because of that, we face an incredible amount of instability, dealing with everything from evictions to having to double up and living with other people and friends and family to literal homelessness. I mean, there were periods of time we were sleeping out of our car. And so it was a tough time. And that was pretty much how I grew up. That was my entire life.
Wow.
I often share that by the time I was 20, I was on a path where I was either going to end up dead or in jail. It was just not, and that's all I saw around me. And then what really changed when you talked a little bit about this earlier was the minute my daughter was born. When, I became a dad, I saw my daughter, I looked at her for the very first time and I realized that, I was like, there's no way that I was going to let this little girl live the life that I lived.
Mm.
It was going to change, that it ends there. And I didn't know what I was going to do, but I was going to change her life. And it meant changing my life too. I remember writing her a letter telling her that I was going to change the world for her. And I was talking about her world. I wasn't really talking about the whole world as a whole, but I meant her world. And I made that decision. And every day since then, I've been working towards that dream of creating a better world for her, for me, for the world around us.
So not only have you been working, man, you've been doing it. You've been doing it for years, and while you may feel that there's still much more work, I mean, you're ready breaking the cycle, right? Like you're present, you're there, you've given up what the past life looked like, and you've created a new life for yourself, new chapters, your story. I love that. But I really want to go back to, what are you learning from your mom? I feel like we go through life and everything is the lesson for us, right? We could sit here and dwell on the negative, or we can take what we have in front of us and say, how do I do better? What did I learn from here? And I can imagine there's a lot of things you're learning from your mom at this point. Talked about the multiple jobs, the multiple kids. Today, when you can kind of look back at that moment, what are you taking from that?
Oh yeah, I mean, my mom has taught me some valuable lessons, and I'll be honest, there was a period of time where I was angry and upset at her at an early age because I just, was unhappy about the way we were living, and I blamed her for a lot. But looking back, as I got older, I started realizing how much love my mom was always willing to give, how hard she worked, that no matter what happened, she never gave up. That you keep pushing forward and you keep working, you keep doing the right thing. And it doesn't matter if the world around you doesn't see it or doesn't believe in you, you got to believe in yourself. And it's funny because my mom, when I was a kid, would always tell me that I was smart. She would always tell me that I was doing really well. I grew up believing that I was a smart kid who got good grades. And as I got older, I remember one day I looked back and I pulled my report cards out and I started seeing, I was like, man, I was failing. I was taking classes, I was going to there. But to my mom, I was a genius, I was smart, and I grew up with that positive mindset. She always had this idea que vamos a salir adelante. And I talked about hope. My mom's never given up hope, ever, no matter what she's doing. She hasn't been able to achieve everything she's done. I think, up until she was 70, she was still trying to go back to school to learn how to use computers and learn how to learn English. She met my father in an ESL class, and as a grown woman, she still doesn't speak English very well, but she's never stops trying. She was always trying to learn. And so a lot of lessons from my mom, and I use those every single day. I also know what it's like to struggle. I see my mom struggle, and I remember this as I'm working with families and we're working with folks in community and even our staff. I see the struggle of a single mom, how hard they work and how important they are in a child's life. And so I bring that with me all the time. I remember that as we're providing support services at La Casa Norte to remind folks that, there are a lot of hardworking, strong moms out there that are leaders. And we need to be able to support them.
I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna kind of put it into the words that you mentioned. We got to go back to that moment your daughter is born. Did she give you hope? Is that what you got out of that?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I looked at her and I was like, I knew the world could be better, in a better place. And the thing is that, I wish I could tell you that I made a decision that instantly, boom, everything started working perfectly and I made a change in my life and I started moving in a positive direction. But I didn't. As hard as I worked in my early 20s, trying to make changes in my life, and not knowing how to do it, I was lost. And in a lot of ways, I started repeating the same cycle my mom was in, not intentionally, because I was very intentional about not wanting to do it, but it was happening. My daughter's mother and I weren't together. We lived in separate homes. So I mean, and while I was with my daughter a lot, she still needed a roof over her head. And there were periods of time where I had to make decisions on whether or not I was going to have a roof over my head or she was going to have a roof over my head. I always picked my daughter. I would make sure that her and her mom had rent paid and that they had, a warm place and what. But sometimes that meant that I didn't have that. And so in my early 20s, I was working multiple jobs, very similar to my mom, still having a hard time keeping a roof over my head, dealing with instability, dealing with homelessness, and a few times dealing with quite literal homelessness, again, sleeping out of my car. And I was going through that in my early 20s. But even then, I never lost hope because there were periods of time where, it was a lot easier to go back to the lifestyle that I had before that. It was a lot easier to get in trouble and to stop hanging out with the wrong element. But I just kept my daughter in mind, and she provided that hope for me. And I knew that I did keep working and that things would get better. And eventually they did. But it wasn't until I had a stable household. And that's why housing to me is still believe that it is the number one issue that we need to be focusing on. Because when you're stuck in that moment, when you're homeless, you have no housing, the only thing you're thinking about is what's in front of you. You're thinking about your next meal. You're thinking about having a roof over your head. You get, and if you stay for long periods of time that way, you get stuck in what I call survival mode, where you're only thinking about the immediate survival. You're not thinking about the future.